Excellent. So, okay, cool. You all are here to learn about the 2AR, right? How to give the 2AR, the best speech and debate, the ultimate speech. It's the final word, right? So what questions or what brings you to this lecture? How many of you are 2As to learn about the 2AR? How many of you are 2Ns who just want to learn how to correct the 2NR and make them pay for their crimes? Yeah, that's good. So we'll focus on the 2AR primarily, and then there'll be a 2NR lecture later that we'll do exactly that. But so what are the difficulties? What problems do you confront? What vexes you about the 2AR? I want to know. Anyone? Anything? Yeah.
How different arguments relate to each other? If that kind of makes sense.
Okay, a little bit. Yeah, you're Nandana. Okay, yeah. So speak a little more of that.
Oh, so like, let's say two things have the same impact. And I want to make kind of a credible story in the 2AR about like, you know, which one has a better internal link or something like that. Or like, if the negative setting like a counter plan and like native bad or something, and they like had to concede something to win native bad.
Okay.
How does that like make
How do you go about doing good argument comparisons? Is that what you're talking about? Like the counter plan solves this part of the app, but maybe doesn't solve this part of the app. How do you go about explaining that? Or they have a DA that has the same impact or like close to the same impact, one of your advantages. And like, how do you go about parsing that out? Is that what you're asking? Okay, yeah, that's a great question. What else? What other thoughts or questions do you all have? Yeah.
Sometimes my partner used to all the prep in the morning.
Okay, yes, 2AR prep. What was your name? Ilana, great, yeah, so right, 2AR prep. And especially with those darn 1ARs, right, use all the prep. All right, use all the prep. How many of y'all experienced that before? Yeah, you're staring down the clock and you're like, oh no, right, like this 1AR needs to prep better. I should do a 1AR lecture because there's a way you should be able to give a stand-up 1AR basically every time, or a little bit of prep, but that's maybe neither here nor there. So yeah, Ellie.
I guess this kind of applies to the thing that like if you're the 2AR, your partner is like never doing unfortunately you have to do all of the prepping and for like good speeches, just how to go about using the least amount of prep so that you can still have good speeches and I guess.
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. We can also talk about so 2AR prep and then co-prep. I think co-prep is an interesting thing that you can do since you all have laptops and computers and Google Documents and stuff like that. I've seen people co-prep the 2AR to great effect. So like parsing out and taking one person takes and preps one issue or two, the other people, you know, the 2AR person preps the rest. How many of y'all do you all do some co-prepping with your partner? Okay, cool. What kind of co-prepping do you tend to do?
Usually I'm either focusing on case or a DA and my partner's focusing on like daughter, like the weaker arguments.
Okay, yeah. So you give them something that's like, all right, I don't really have time to do that, but I think you can handle it. So I think that's a good way to do it. Do any of you, yeah.
Like, I know that like my partner is probably like better at like answering and extending like counter plans than I am, and I'm better at like DAs and stuff. So I typically like do like write out all the DA stuff. Just
I love that. Yeah. So if you've got like your partner is a specialist in something, if they do all the politics work or something like that, are you a partner? Or, no, okay, I was gonna say specialist here. But yeah, right, that can work really well if your partner does research on one of the particular areas, stuff like that. You can do some co-prepping. So, all right. Hello, hey Harris, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Even when I'm standing over here and stuff?
Yeah, I can hear pretty well.
Okay, cool, good. I'll try to set this up a little better too, so you can like kind of see the board better. Okay, there we go. All right, perfect, excellent. There we go. So a few things that I wanted to talk about as far as the 2AR are concerned. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. We got our chalkboard all the way down. These chalkboards are so slick. I love these chalkboards. So when you're thinking about the 2AR as a speech, right? The 2AR has the luxury of being able to watch the entire debate and provide commentary, right, about the contours of the round. And what do I mean by that? By providing a commentary about the contours of the round. So the best 2ARs are the 2As that are like, you know, a lot of stuff has happened in this debate, and I may not use that language exactly, but this is conceptually what they're doing, right? they're gonna say, well, a lot of stuff has happened in this debate, right? The neg read some cards about this, the app read some cards about this, but really, here's why the affirmative wins, okay? And that's a little bit of a different perspective than just being in the weeds on a bunch of different arguments. So how do you get there? One of the best 2As, so I debated a really long time ago. I think of Tristan Morales. Has anyone heard of Tristan Morales before? Excellent. His name is dead in the debate community. No, it's great. He won the NDT twice and got like 3 Copeland Awards and stuff like that. He was pretty good. And Tristan, I watched him a lot because I was younger and he was older, and I would go watch him in the Elon, the finals and stuff like that. I remember in the 2AR, oftentimes it would seem like he kind of transcended the line by lines. You've never seen a 2A do that, right? Where they're doing, right, the line by line, they're answering the arguments, but also they're providing a perspective on the debate. Sometimes people talk about the perspective as like the view from 30,000 feet. Y'all heard that before? View from 30,000 feet. That's something one of my college coaches like to say, view from 30,000 feet. You're flying above. So you're above the fray, right? As the 2AR, you should be above the fray. It's not to say you aren't going to be doing line by line, but think about what the contours of the round are. This is the mindset that you should be in. And so we're gonna talk about our mindset and our perspective, and we're gonna talk about how that relates to prepping the 2AR with some different tricks and kind of advanced tips that you can use for this mindset to achieve kind of this general perspective on the 2AR. All right, so one of the things that can help you a lot with this is, so we've got prepping, we have pre-tournament prep, and then also in the round prep. So the things that you should do pre-tournament. How many of you all, like when you write an affirmative or, when you're thinking about the strategy of the app, how many of you know what your 2AR is going to be in various circumstances? Okay, Nandana, Luke, yeah, what is your 2AR going to be in, if they go for the politics DA and case?
No link and like access to impact.
Oh, okay. No link and we solve the impact. All right, that'd be good. So do you have a preference for one of the advantages? Let's say we're reading our India app. We're reading an India app in our lab. We're writing an India app. So
I'm gonna go for solvency that like it's not partisan. Yes.
Okay, some like link takeout, stuff like that. Answers to the DA, that's fair. Yeah. So what other circumstances? How many other times you know what you're gonna go for in the 2AR? Yeah, Nandana. Okay, you're gonna go for like NATO good and a solid defense of NATO.
Yeah, or like whatever turns dropped by the blockage, I would go for it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, read a bunch of turns, kind of like you're gonna like spread someone out. That's a decent strategy if you're fast. Clear, yeah.
I like it depends on the app, and I guess like its weaknesses. So like last year I read like an app that was pretty like susceptible to politics DA.
Yeah.
But like it was really good against like process campus and other like office, but against like politics, like I think the 2A, like I typically like to extend like no internal link on the politics, yeah, like for PC and like
Okay, cool. No, that sounds great. So part of what I'm getting at here is you can, depending on the way that you write your affirmative, right, you can chart the course. So you want to chart, right, the affirmative course. So you've heard that the 2A is the captain of the app ship, right? Yes, you've heard that. Excellent. Well, keeping with that, seafaring metaphor, you want to pick the best path. Oh, excuse me. You want to pick the best pathway forward for winning the debate. This is highly important. So thinking through what the different strategies are the negative can go for and how the affirmative is going to respond to those and being realistic, right? So be realistic. So you might self-consciously write an affirmative. We had, I like to write apps that are like small and not topical, but have an argument. So you like small, not topical apps?
We read Rio Grande last year. That was semi-topical.
Excellent. Yeah. What was your name?
Eileen.
Eileen. Great, Eileen. Yeah, I live in Texas, so yeah, Rio Grande. I've been on the Rio Grande. Semi-topical, yeah.
We read
reduce military issues impact statements about renewables to decrease the amount of or decrease the pollution from renewables.
Nice. So you like applied NEPA to like DoD stuff? Yeah. That's a great app. I wrote the DoD NEPA app like 7 years ago or more, 10 years ago now on this military, the war powers topic. It was excellent. So yeah, NEPA military apps classic. Winter v NRDC and stuff, the Supreme Court decision. Yeah, very good. So if you're realistic, you're like, okay, right? We prefer to write an app that's small. And so we got to be ready, right, for the 2NR on topicality, you know, potentially. And then also like the politics DA, because politics links to everything. And then your process counter plans, etc. Not just enough to know what those things are and that they exist, but also figuring out what the particular arguments are, right? What are the particular arguments that you want to go for? So you want to trace the debate back through, right? From the 1AC to the 2AC, 1AR, 2AR. So thinking through the 2AR in your pre-tournament prep and charting the AF course is very, very important. This will win you so many debates. So like if your AF if it links to politics a lot, right? Like let's say, you know, it's just super unpopular or something, or I guess really popular now that we have like the GOP good midterms DA, one of the two. Right? And you know that you're going to be debating that DA a lot. You want to set the debate up to make your 2AR strategy effective. And what this requires, you know, usually, right? So you want your 2AC front line probably to have like lots of arguments. So, right, lots of arguments. Then the 1AR, so good 2AR pre-tournament prep really starts with 1AR blocks. You want blocks on blocks on blocks, lots and lots and lots of them. So this is where someone asked, what happens if the 1AR uses all your prep? Oh, that's those darn 1ARs. That's really partly your fault, I'll say, as a 2A. Yeah, so it is. It's partly your fault because you didn't write enough 1AR blocks. Who here's like, wait a minute, I don't want to write the 1AR blocks. Are you thinking that as a 2A? Yeah. Why do you want to write 1AR blocks?
Because I'm not doing one there, and I want prep my own stuff,
That's fair. You want to prep your own stuff?
but I know.
Yeah. So, but you're the captain of the app ship, all right? And the 1A is not even really like the first mate of the app ship, to be honest. They're like the deck swapper, okay? They just need to take orders. But those 1As, they don't like to take orders. You have experienced this, right? The 1A, they kind of do their own thing sometimes. You're like, what are you doing? I can't believe this is happening. Yeah, well, yeah, right? You're like sitting there during the 1A, like, what is even going on, right? Why am I doing this with my life, right? It happens. You're like, we weren't supposed to go for, right, the internal link takeouts. We were supposed to go for the link turn. How did this happen, right? Okay, that's your fault. Yeah, Kabir.
For 1AR blocks, can't you just like write more like succinct versions of like the strong 2AC?
Well,
I guess.
so 1AR blocks, here's the deal with 1AR blocks. What they need to do is they need to take an argument from the 2AC. So, right, you have lots of arguments. An argument is a claim and a warrant. Claim and a warrant. So let's say that they read the GOP midterms DA midterms good, or sorry, GOP good, or whatever god awful reason, but that's what they've chosen. Okay. So the 2AC, you make lots of different arguments, right? You're like, no, the GOP is going to lose in the midterm. They're not going to win right now. The plan helps the GOP because like we're tough on NATO, so you like have like a little bit of a no, sorry, you don't read any uniqueness. You read uniqueness overwhelms length because I'm thinking of the 2AR strategy. My 2AR strategy, I want to go for impact turn. Let's say, okay, you're like, we want to impact turn this dissent. It's going to be great. So you read a uniqueness overwhelms length. You're like, GOP is overwhelmingly going to win the midterms now, so no chance the plan flips it. But then you read some link takeouts and link turns that are like, but the plan's super popular, so it'll probably help the GOP anyway, right? not a contradiction with an impact turn, because it's not a unique link turn. Hopefully you know what that means, right? Then you read some like no interlink takeouts, and then you read an impact turn or two. You're like, and by the way, the GOP is bad. They hurt climate change, and inflation is good. So the Democrats increase inflation, and that's good. Everyone kind of with me? So you got like, 10 arguments or whatever. For the 1AR blocks here, what you want to do is take, right, the 2 or 3 arguments, so claim and warrant, and you write extensions plus have new cards that expand on the warrant. Expand on the warrant. This is very important for 1AR blocks. We're going to talk about how that influences the 2AR, but this is all related to giving a great 2AR, right? It really starts like in the rest of the preparation. So when you expand on the warrant with your 1AR blocks, what that looks like is writing a block for like inflation good, and you're like, okay, our 2AC card says that inflation helps a whole host of different industries, like the banking industry, okay? Y'all with me? Just like one card, inflation helps the banking industry, that's great. What would you do for a 1AR block for inflation good? What do you think? What would you put in a 1AR block? You'd write an extension, of course. You're like, extend our 2AC card. That's what you're talking about, right, Veer? Extend our 2AC card, inflation is good. Is that all you do? There's definitely some other things. Yeah, Nandani, what did you?
Well, I guess like you said, answer new block arguments.
And then you also want to do, so we call this at Trinity University where I coach, we call it a hammer, which is great. I love the 1AR hammer. So you want to hammer home the specific thing. We'll get to argument comparison. Don't worry, I won't forget about that. If I do, you'll have to tell me about it. So, okay. So what you would do is then you also want, right, additional pieces of evidence, usually like 2 to 3 new cards that expand on this warrant. So to go off of this example, right, we're going to say inflation, right, good for banking. You'll understand why, right? Because they're going to like loan a bunch of money. So like JP Morgan, right, Stanley, and all those companies, they're going to make a lot of money because inflation goes up, which means they make more money on loans, right, potentially. So inflation good. Then what you would do with these new pieces of evidence, you would be like, the banking industry, right, is key to the overall economy. Right, key to the economy. Then you'd probably also want another piece of evidence that's like inflation causes higher wages, which offsets, right, the impact on consumers, so it doesn't hurt consumer confidence or, right, consumer spending. You understand why you would use those additional pieces of evidence? You obviously can't read my handwriting here because it's horrible, right? But you'd want banking industry key to the economy, because we have a card about why inflation helps the banking industry, and also their claim for inflation hurting the economy is based on consumer spending, but that's not true. That's what a real 1AR block looks like, right? Then in the 2AR, we're talking about like argument comparison. That was what you asked that question, right, Nandana? They're going to say, well, the GOP is good because the GOP is going to prevent the Democrats from doing all this social spending, which is going to cause inflation, and that's going to collapse the economy. What are you going to say in your 2AR?
I'm gonna say that actually inflation offsets inflation is the higher wages. The Democrats put higher wages, which offsets the inflation. And I'd probably expand on it and maybe say that like, oh, it's looking at better for the economy. Okay. Yeah. Because of, I guess, like higher wages mean more employment. Yep. And that avoids the fourth area. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to have those 2 or 3 specific warrants that then you can compare, right, to the negative. So then as you go about thinking about the 2AR in this circumstance, what you're going to say is, look, right, the negative has red cards. We understand the negative has attempted to debate. Thank you, negative. We welcome your feedback and your input. However, okay, what the negative has failed to do in this circumstance is anticipate and respond to the appropriate pivot, which is that what we really need to be worried about is the collapse of the banking industry, right? And the banking industry is much bigger than consumer confidence. So inflation will help them, and that's key to overall economic growth. And by the way, inflation actually helps consumers.
So they're like internal link card from the 1NC, which is only this long, about why, you know, inflation is bad for the economy because it makes everything more expensive. Sorry, that's not going to get it done, right? And that's where the 2AR, if you do your pre-tournament prep correctly and chart the apt course, it can make your 2AR prep very easy because you're like, okay, here's my strategy against this argument. So you want to do this for all kinds of different things. We're not going to talk through each of them, but pre-tournament prep and charting the apt course, right, is thinking about what you link to. What are the good strategies? What are the cards that the 1AR needs to read? So, right, be realistic. What links to your app? What are the good strategies? And then what are the arguments that you need to win? And how can you prep the 2AC through the 1AR to do that? So Ela's like, oh, I don't like writing 1AR blocks. You got to write 1AR blocks. You're the 2A. You should write your 2AC front lines and everything, and then just immediately move on and start writing 1AR blocks where you're doing this. Cutting new cards, figuring out what the internal links are. What's the impact, right? How does that interact with the DA? How does it interact with the counter plan? So if there's a counter plan that solves part of the app, US unilateral counter plan. Let's say you want to go for, you know, you write your app, it's pretty good and everything, but the US unilateral counter plan, so just like do it just through the United States, like just have the AI, you know, US promote AI norms or something. And that solves like a big chunk of the app. But then you've got like a pretty decent kind of like NATO AI add-on. You can prep the add-on for the 2AC, right? It's like 2 cards. It's a nice little add-on. And then what do you do with the 1AR? What do you want for the 1AR? Extensions, yeah. So you'd be like, you know, extend our argument, type up some extensions. And then you could have like a run of impact cards too, probably, right? Ways that it turns the DA, right? Everything like that. So you could write an impact hammer, that's what we call it too. An impact hammer where you're like, and by the way, like NATO collapse outweighs this. NATO collapse causes their impact. NATO collapse causes this, right? Like card, just like nice short little 1AR cards, just ready to go. And then when your 1AR is like, oh, what do I do here? And you're like, haha, like read this. It's like, oh, that's genius. Thank you. Right. Yeah. You have a question about that or?
Well, no, I thought by the impacts, I thought you meant that you'd be reading in the 1AR.
Yeah, you can do stuff in the 1AR. I'm definitely fully advocating that. So
Okay.
in good debates. Yeah, Ela.
Where do you fit in also responding to a blog?
That's great. So yeah. So back to like, this is all on your 1AR and they've got to respond to the next block. 1AR spend way too much time just like answering stupid crap on the part of the negative, because the 1AR choice is huge. So when we're thinking about the contours of the round and having perspective, here's like giving the 2AR. So giving the 2AR. So that's your perspective, right? Here are hints and tips for giving the 2AR. The first is choose. Choose. So in the 2NR, if you're affirmative and the 2NR just goes for everything, does that make you happy or sad? Yeah, it makes you happy. Why does it make you happy to do it for everything? What's that, Eileen? Oh, okay, they undercovered, yeah. So unless they're just speed demons, right? They're probably not going to be able to effectively go for everything. Then the judge is going to yell at them later, and everybody loves it when the judge yells at the other team. Secretly, we love that, right? Like take that negative team, right? But yeah, you went for too much. In the same way that everyone loves it when you're asked if they go for everything. Oh, here, let's see. I'll move this a little so you can see the board a little better. Keep our stuff good. The 2AR is about choosing arguments. Choose arguments. Oftentimes, you should choose one advantage or impact to one advantage. Okay? One advantage and maybe only even one impact on one advantage to go for in the 2AR. All right, how many of y'all do that kind of already? Okay, good. You should pretty much always be doing that. If you're going for 2 advantages in the 2AR and you don't know why you're doing that, no, right? It's the same way as if the negative goes for 2 disadvantages in the 2NR and they don't know why they're doing it, right? It's like, oh, well, I had 2 of them, so of course I could go for both. No, right? Go for 1, do it well, have a good reason. have a reason why, a reason to choose the advantage that you go for. A reason. And this could be related to your pre-tournament prep. So you might say, for example, that if they read, you might have like an area advantage, like an AI or like a cybersecurity advantage, probably. And then you might also have like a NATO advantage. I think this will be pretty common this year. I'd say most affirmatives will be written this way. Why will most affirmatives be written this way, do you think? What's the strategy? Yeah.
Well, the NATO advantage is like helps the NATO picks, I guess.
Yeah.
It shows some deficits for that.
Mhm.
And like the first advantage, I guess, just like gives them
Gives them topicality. It also beats the like work with NATO on some other issue kind of plan, probably, right? So get this 1-2 punch. Do you have a comment or thought back there? You're stretching. Stretching is good. Stretching is great. Okay, cool. Exactly. So if they go for, right, the counter plan out of NATO, you should probably go for your NATO advantage. And you're gonna have to, pretty much you're gonna have to do whatever is necessary to make that happen, okay? That's the other thing I think that people, with the mindset of rebuttals, like the 2NR or the 2AR, it can be very easy just to get into like, oh, well, whatever the path of least resistance is, right? Like I'll just figure out what they've dropped and I'll just kind of like go for that. But if the negative undercovers one advantage, strategically, and then they go for a counter plan that mostly solves that advantage, you have to go for the other advantage. You just have to. And you should be realistic about that and strategic. So choose your arguments, right? What is the reason to go for the advantage that you do in fact go for? All right. So that's when you're before, right, the 2AR begins, you say to yourself, which advantage do I need to go for? Why do I need to go for this advantage? Then when you're thinking about, right, giving the 2AR, so choose to, right, do a short overview, write a short overview. Or a short overview that lays out the debate for the judge. The things to include in this overview, right? There's things to include and things not to include. Things to include would be like impact comparison. Okay. Let's see. You said someone mentioned Michaela's impact comparison lecture, or yeah, Eileen.
Well, Michaela and Carmen have like a hot take.
Oh yes.
You should never do overviews ever.
I know, and it's a terrible take, in my opinion. It seriously is terrible, and you can tell them I said so. Yeah, you should never ever do. I guess I don't know, whatever. But let's say so. All right. Yeah, that's great. Let's say so. You never do overviews. Never ever do overviews. What if then the negative, in their debating, right? They're doing their debating. They're going along, and the 2NR goes for the NATO pick, and then they go for some NATO terms maybe, and they also go for like a politics PA, etc. Right? I guess for me, where do you start the debate then in the 2AR?
I guess line.
Yeah, you would just start at the top, and you're going to be like, they say we don't have an internal link to our advantage, but we do have an internal link to our advantage, and it is as follows. They say, right, that our evidence is terrible and garbagey, but our evidence is great and not garbagey, and here's that card. And then they say we don't have an impact, but we do have an impact, and the impact's really big, and it outweighs their impact. It's like, oh, cool, I guess we're doing impact comparison right here then. That's fine. I don't know. I see the argument for not doing an overview. I really do. But I think what is nice about the 2AR specifically, so here, maybe this, we'll pick out of no overviews. We'll say never ever do an overview except in the 2AR. How's that? No, I understand their hot take, but yeah, Ela.
I was just gonna ask, what would the overview be? Because like, if you don't want to get into impact comparison yet, so you do that later, what would you say in the overview?
Well, I guess if you're not going to do impact comparison, I think you should do impact comparison because it allows you the opportunity to choose. Right? So going back to what I said here, right? It's very nice for me, I think, when the 2AR is like, we are only going for the LIO impact, right? There's zero chance the counterplan solves it. We're going to win if the LIO impact turns all of their impacts as well, right? And it's fast, right? They have, no answer to the speed and the rapidity with which the liberal international order could collapse. It could happen tomorrow. Russia, China, a whole host of other countries are going to get involved in conflicts. Those conflicts will spread around the globe, right? Their NATO bad impact takeouts and turns don't anticipate, right, that possibility. Now the line by line. I don't know, right? You see what I mean? That's like a nice little impact, right? And the judge is like, oh, great, cool. They're going for the LIO impact. I understand what's happening, right? Whereas if you do it on the line by line, I think you're going to be tempted every time. They're going to be like, well, they said we don't have an impact, right, to, I guess like U.S.-China relations, but we do have an impact. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be tempted to debate that. Whereas like if you just put it in the overview and like, here's the impact we're going for, here's the thing that's happening. Then when you get to the stuff that's irrelevant, they're going to be like, there's no impact to climate change. You can just like, yeah, we agree. There's no impact to climate change. We're not going for that impact, right? It's like clean. It's nice. You've chosen. I don't know. I think it's better. There's an argument. If you can just do it on the line, well, that's fine. But here's the other thing: judges are not very smart. A lot of them. But sorry, we should just gotta say it, right? Or they're not paying attention, or you know what I mean. So like it just helps them too. So help your judges. Help them help you, right? Help them help you. That's what the 2AR overview is for. Lays out the debate and does impact comparison, where you choose your impact and then compare it to what they chose. That's the luxury of the 2AR. The luxury of the 2AR is that you know now what they've gone for. So you can pick the thing that's most strategic to respond to, right, their argument, which you've charted out, hopefully, in some sense, in the pre-tournament environment, right? So it's like, oh, great, this is awesome. They've gone for the NATO bad stuff. My preferred impact for NATO bad is LIO or climate change or whatever, right? Whatever, impact argument that you want to pick, and that's what you're ready to go for. And no, I understand the no overview crowd, but I think they've taken it a little too far. Yeah. Those specifically Michaela and Klarman. You can say that I said so. Okay, choose arguments. Write a short overview that lays out the debate. Then the other thing that you should be aware of is in giving the 2AR is make sure, right, respond and prioritize threat level red arguments. Threat level red arguments. Now, what do I mean by that? What's a threat level red argument? Let's say someone goes for the security K. Has anyone ever debated the security K? Had security K ran on them? Yeah, Ellie, you have. You debated the security K? Oh, you helped write the security K. Awesome. Are there any arguments in there, if you were negative, that if the app dropped, that you'd be like really excited about?
That the app doesn't actually securitize, even when you.
Okay.
So the game is about like over securitization and how like framing Russia and China as a threat, it gives us it like rationalizes our actions against them and makes them more of a threat. And if they drop, the common argument that people read against it is, no, we don't actually securitize, like we're actually helping to securitize. If they drop that, then I can just be like, you literally can see it, you securitize, so therefore.
Oh yeah, okay, so nice, like a little concession. I was thinking too, like there's there's a whole host of arguments on the negative that are like quickies. That's like, let's see, like no value to life. Y'all hear about that? Like no value to life. Serial policy failure. You heard of those before too? Anyone lose on no value to life ever or serial policy failure? Yeah. Serial policy failure, exactly, right? So if they say serial policy failure, there we go, spelled correctly. and the 2AR drop serial policy failure, the judge can just look at the affirmative team and just be like, oh, well, obviously, like policies just fail all the time, and we don't know why or how, but like no policies work. So you lose, the neg wins. Do you have any questions? We did lose, right? And it's just like, that sucks. I've lost a bunch of debates like that. So you want to think about, so as far as priorities, right? Write your short overview, respond and prioritize threat level red arguments. But I guess first, sorry, I guess this should be point 4. We'll do point 3. Point 3 really is win your offense, though. You got to win your offense first. Win offense. I should have said that first. Win offense. So after your overview, you want to go to your advantage, or right your impact turns, whatever it is. It could be an advantage or impact turns, or an add-on. I actually really like, sometimes if you write an app and there's like a pretty cool advantage, but a counterplan solves it fairly well, you can just read it as an add-on in the 2AC. And then most negative teams don't want to read new counterplans in the block, right? In the 2NC, they just kind of don't want to get involved with that sort of thing, because like conditionality and like 2NC counterplans are bad and stuff like that. And you can kind of rope a dope them a little bit. And then the 1AR reads like, like 4 more cards on the add-on. And then it's like a full advantage. And then the 2AR can go for it. We used to do that stuff all the time. That's great. Because then the negative is like, oh, damn it, right? Like if this was in the 1AC, we would have just read our counterplan and we would have had the counterplan that solved it. But we didn't read the counterplan because it was just a short add-on in the 2AC. And then the 1AR read like 4 more cards. So like, what do we do here, right? And it's just like you mess with the 2NR a lot. Anyway, I think that's a great idea. It could be worked to great effect. So win your offense, your advantage, impact turns, what have you, right? Then respond to and prioritize threat level red arguments first, or right, spend the most time on those. And as far as responding to negative arguments, whether they're threat level red or your garden variety, whatever, right? Like think about choosing arguments that cohere, choosing arguments that cohere with, right, the offense that you are going for. That cohere with the offense that you're going for. So what I mean by that is that the 2AR might not really need to do a lot. It's a nice speech. I love the 2AR. It's just a very fun speech. And we'll talk a little bit about strategies for like slipping in new arguments and lying and cheating and stealing, which I know is part of the description. We haven't done lots of lie, cheat, and steal yet, so don't worry, we'll get there. Before you can lie, cheat, and steal, though, you got to get the basics down. So you want to spend most time choosing arguments that cohere with the offense you're going for. So I guess, for example, if you wanted to go for like this inflation impact term, let's say, right, on the GOP midterms DA, are you also going to go for like a no link argument? You need to go for a no link argument. You probably shouldn't go for a no link argument. It might be the case that if you win, there's no link to the DA, they might win like a NATO bad turn, and then you just lose the debate because your offense on the DA might outweigh the NATO bad turn, right? It might be actively bad for you to go for a no link argument on the DA. So right, think about those things. Don't just go for, it's like, oh, well, they read the counterplan, I got to extend the permutations. You don't have to do anything, right? You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You could just go for the counterplan doesn't solve this one impact. And just win that one impact is bigger than the DA they've got, and then just win one, like no internal link argument on the DA. And like, that's it. So you really just had to win like 3 things, right? You got 5 minutes, win 3 arguments. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, but I'd say most negatives don't like to do that because most add-ons are like pretty bad. They like missing cards and stuff. So those are usually just like, oh, there's no internal link, and then the 1AR is like, oh, you're right, here's an internal link. Right. That's great. I love doing that. That's my yeah. We prep like when we prep apps, it's like exactly what we do. Right. It's like here are the 2 cards that like kind of like gesture at an add-on, and then the 1 AR is like, oh yeah, here are the 4 cards like making it advance. Like boom, boom, boom. Perfect. Yeah.
What is the next thing that like on the wall?
Well, think about that though. So let's say you read an add-on and you're like, the plan solves U.S.-French relations or whatever, and then the impact of U.S.-French relations is, let's see, I don't know, what is the French good for? They're gonna ship baguettes here, and that helps our economy or whatever. I don't know. I'm sorry, it's a bad example. And then they're like, well, there's no internal link between, like bread exports and like the economy. You think it's fair for one area to be like, well, actually, we have this excellent card, but there isn't internal link. I don't know. Who thinks that's fair? But, yeah, that seems fair to me. So,
Yeah, but like,
Right.
how do you respond?
how do you as a negative respond to that? Or
No, like,
oh, on the app? Oh yeah, you should just be like, we were just answering your argument in the block, right? That's the thing, like for cards like this too. So these 1AR blocks where you're expanding the warrants, invariably, right? Like the negative is going to say something about how inflation hurts the economy. And then the 1AR is like, they said inflation hurts the economy. Someone else is like, how do you prep the 1AR to answer block arguments? That's what you're doing here, right? You're like, well, they said that inflation hurts the economy. But no, it doesn't. We had a card on that. Also, by the way, banking is key to the economy, which is what our 2AC card is about. And inflation actually helps wage earners. So it doesn't hurt the economy, it helps the economy. Those cards are totally justified. I don't know, it seems like to me, right? There's nothing like new or different. I mean, it's different. It changes the debate. That's the whole point of app strategies. You want to move the negative where you want them to be, right? Don't let them just sit on their stuff and be happy where they're at. No, right? The app's job is to mess with the negative and teach them a lesson. All right, cool. That's kind of like the basics. Now I'm going to give you all some maybe like more advanced tips for the 2AR. Okay, some advanced 2AR tips that you learn over the years of crafty 2AR preparation. So, okay, there are some great ones. The first one deals with listening to and thinking about using the 2NC cross-X as a method. So this is like under like lie, cheat, and steal, I guess. We'll put that here, lie, cheat, and steal. Steal those ballots from the negative. So the first one is use the 2NC cross-X to prime the judge to listen to and vote on, quote unquote, new arguments. Listen to and vote on, right, new 2AR. Why do I say new in quotes? New 2AR arguments. So let's say that the negative extends like the neolib K, right? For the 2NC. Like the whole 2NC. What are you going to cross-X about the 2NC of the neolib K? Yeah.
Well, I guess you can ask about the alt, like maybe global spillover.
I think that's great. That's exactly what I would ask about. I spent like 3 minutes asking about alt and global spillover and stuff. Yeah. Oh, true. You definitely want to hammer out if there's any threat level red stuff. Yeah, 100%. That would be a great little checklist. Yeah, like, is it a floating pick on? You got to sort that out first, of course. But then maybe spend, the bulk of the time talking about the alternative. Why does the alternative solve? How does it work? Here are my problems with it, right? Kind of have a little debate with them about it for like 2.5 minutes, whatever. Then the 1AR, what's the 1AR going to say about like the alternative? There's like, oh, the alt doesn't solve, right? Just like a quick little 1 sentence or 2. But if the 2AR wants to go for, right, all the alternative doesn't solve arguments or alt bad arguments, that was all in the 2NC cross-X. So there's a weird psychological trick here, right? That, trust me, judges will allow it. Even if the 1AR is quite quick on it, if the cross-X was the bulk of the time, it doesn't feel new for the 2AR to then get up and spend like 2 minutes just talking about the alt and why it doesn't solve and draw those themes from the cross-X. Okay? This is a great trick. I think it works really well. Yeah, Eileen.
Do you want to be like subtle about it, or do you want to say like cross-X checks?
Oh, I mean, like the 1AR should probably say something like, you know, you don't have to be too cheerleader about it, but it's just like we own them in cross-X on this. Like alternative doesn't solve, like there's no global spillover and there are no agents that can interact with it. And then the judge will flow that and they'll be like, oh yeah, right, that was CX. For the two ends out there, spoiler alert, you should really pay attention to this. Because the 2AR is going to go for the things that are in cross-X, whether or not they're even like trying to tip their hand, right? They just are. So remember what was said in the cross-X. If you're the 2N and they're cross-Xing a lot about it. But I think this is a great way to get new arguments into the 2AR that don't seem particularly new. Okay, the second way to get new arguments in, and then this is related to kind of an advanced prep tip that you should only do if you're really, I think, advanced. But the second way is doing evidence comparisons and index. So there's some old adage that's, you know, it's not new if it's true. Anyone ever hear that? That's the sort of ethos of 2As everywhere. It's not new if it's true. That's not true. It is still new. But there's one area where it's just not, and that's if you're doing evidence comparisons or analysis. So let's say you're talking about, you know, your evidence and the ways that it interacts with their evidence, and you've got particular warrants, right? Your cards and your evidence, right, kind of anticipates and discusses what was in the 1NC card, for example, et cetera, et cetera. It's okay if you haven't brought that up really at any point in the debate until the 2AR. Why do you think I say that? Why is it okay to just wait until the 2AR and be like, man, that 1NC card on the link is pretty bad. Yeah. Well, so they can't defend it. I guess what's the, yeah, Luke.
You've probably already done it, and you've done your debate, you say this card is weak, and then you go back to the next one.
Yeah, right. You probably mentioned it a little bit before, and you just haven't expounded on it, right? On the particular weaknesses. You might have asked a question about it across that. What else is true? Why do we have this prohibition against like new arguments in the 2AR? Why can't you just bring up something like, hey, I don't think there's an internal link to this DA, right? Like I just now noticed it, but why is that like sort of forbidden, as it were? Why do we not want that? Yeah.
Because the neg doesn't really get a real answer. So.
Exactly. The neg doesn't get a chance to respond. But did the negative choose to read the cards that they read? They did, yes. And if you had told them they had bad cards, would that mean are they like saving their other better 1NC cards or stuff? We assume not. We assume that the negative has submitted the best evidence that they have on all of the questions that they've got, right? Thus, it's okay for the 2AR to make fun of that evidence because it's the best that the negative got. So this is one area where the 2AR can get up and say, well, right, like your evidence on this question is really bad. And here's why. 1, 2, 3, it assumes this, there's an alt cause related to this. It doesn't assume our 1AC evidence, which says this, right? We solve for that concern, all of those things. It's all based on the evidence that's being read. I had one time I went through this permutation, which I had cross-X'd the 2NC about like the whole time on this counter plan. And then my 1AR was like 12 seconds on the perm. So he was like, yeah, the perm solved. That was obviously all in cross-X. And then the 2AR was like 4 minutes of the perm, and we won. And the neg was bad. All right. So 3, another advanced tip is you can lightly flow the block. This is also controversial, but you can lightly flow the neg block. What do I mean by lightly flow? You basically want to keep your ear to the ground, right? Keep an eye out for these threat level red arguments. For arguments that must be responded to, must respond arguments. Okay. Well, so if you're not flowing the block, then what are you going to be doing? What could you be doing? Well, if you're worried that the 1AR is going to use all of your prep time, which may be a fair worry, yeah.
You can start like writing out answers to the threat level red.
You can write answers to threat level red arguments, and you can also just start prepping the 2AR. all right? Usually you'll have a pretty good idea once the block is going, like what you want to go for and what arguments are important and what maybe impact you want to go for. That'll also help you, and you can start to help prep the 1AR, okay? So this is like a both and. You can do some prep, lightly flow the neg block. I like to lightly flow the neg block, or I used to. I'm way too old for this now. And then read their cards, right? Read the neg's cards. Read the neg's cards, right? Prep or put together 1AR blocks. You could write or think about, right, the 2AR overview. Take that, Michaela and Klarman. All right, the 2AR overview, etc. This is also, if you're reading the next cards, right, related a bit to comment 2, which is then you're going to be able to do good evidence comparisons. You could like write those out or type them out, right? Because it's like, well, if you're going for no alt on the neolib K, you know you're going to go for no alt on the neolib K. You can just start writing answers and write arguments about their evidence. What does their evidence say? What was our like revolutions fail card from the 2AC? What are the 1AR cards that I'm going to give my partner about this that say, right, that the movements fail or the alt fails or capitalism is human nature or whatever, right? And like write that into part of your 2AR chunk. You can just, you know, prep that right on the computer or something like that. I also like, as far as 1AR blocks go, that's really huge. This is more of an advanced comment. If you find yourself and your partner like dropping important stuff from the block, then you should probably do this. But if you trust your 1AR and they're pretty good and they can like answer stuff fairly well, but they always mess things up because they don't read the right blocks, then this is great for you. So yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. Like help 1A help you. Okay, well, we were mostly running to our time, but I will take a few minutes for questions and stuff too. So questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess this is more of a judgment question, but when do you like know that you should kick out of both advantages and extend it?
You know, you're right. That is a judgment question, but I think it's also like a matter of prep too, and the kind of anticipating that. I think sometimes that's like what you want to do. And then sometimes that's where you just end up. And there are debates that happen, of course, like that. I think if you have prepped for it, you should be able to do it, right? Without another advantage. And sometimes that's the plan. So I've seen this work. It works really well, especially if you're ready for it and like internal link turns on politics. This is one reason I bring this kind of inflation thing up is great. Like the bill is bad or whatever, it can be really good if it's, you know, related to like politics. If you aren't quite ready for it though, you might still need the advantage, right? To outweigh whatever like residual negative arguments there are. Definitely a judgment call. If you have some specific thing though that the negative hasn't answered, then I think that you should just go for the term. And then you can explain it, you know what I mean? So if it's like here, like inflation, if they drop that inflation helps wages, which offsets, right, the impact to consumers, then you could go through their cards, right? And you could say, well, here's what the 1NC card about inflation and why it hurts the economy says. It says that inflation makes the price of goods more expensive. But our evidence says that inflation is inevitably offset by wages, which means it doesn't matter if you have to pay more for a dishwasher or a car if your wages have gone up by more than enough to offset that price, right? Their piece of 2NC evidence says that consumer confidence will be wrecked. But our evidence says that consumer confidence, right, it takes into account the impact on consumer confidence. And the banking card, right, says that the banking industry is key to the economy because XYZ, which outweighs the impact. You see, like if you kind of have the goods on it, then you can just go for the term probably, assuming they don't have other options on the case, et cetera, too. So, yeah. Oh yeah, that's a great one. I think again, so you know, going back to I erase it now. There are some circumstances where like that's the plan, right? And I think it's okay for that to be the plan. Like if somebody reads, you know, 10 counter plans and 5 critiques, they're all conditional against you. What are you going to go for in the 2AR? Yeah, it should be condo, right? Like that should just be the plan. And so you got to figure out where the line is, you know, if it's like
3 counterplans and 2 Ks, and you're just going to go for condo. Just prep it and be ready to go for it. There are circumstances where you like kind of, I guess, are forced into that situation. If you're forced into that situation, then the 2AR can be a great time where you get to describe what about the debate forced you into that circumstance, and you can at least say it was the thing that the neg did, right? You're like, yeah, we're going for theory. The reason we're going for theory is because of the heinous stuff that happened, right, in the 1NC or whatever. I would also say probably you can go for condo as a voting issue. There are very few other theory arguments, though, that you could go for. It would be like reject the neg style. You could go for maybe like process counterplan is bad as a reason to reject the counterplan. Probably not as a reason to reject the team, though. That would be like quite desperation, in my opinion. I would really avoid that. Yeah. That's like the neg going for like severance perms or a voting issue or something. You just, yeah, you don't want to be in that circumstance. Try to get something else. But yeah, I think that's a great question. Elon. I think so, but it's the only one I can think of off. I think that there are nice theory arguments that you can go for to provide you with like other impacts, though. So another good one I think is like vague alternatives on critiques. I think that's a great theory argument that's underutilized. And then the impact to it isn't like reject the neg, right? It's not just vote affirmative out of, just because you want to. But really, it's like, look, because the alternative is vague, then you should either have a more generous understanding of the permutation. So like, look, we don't really know what the alt does. They've been pretty vague about it, and our cards are really vague. So you should just assume whatever the best case is for the perm, right? That we can incorporate the insights of the alternative into the permutation in the ways that there are evidence sort of like vaguely gets at, right? And then the judge, I think, is more willing in that circumstance to be like, yeah, the alt was vague. So like I did read the permutation in a little more charitable light, right? That kind of thing, I think, can help a lot with like, making the debate better for you in some ways. But yeah, other questions, other thoughts about the 2AR? Sure, it's fun too. Have fun. Oh, and the last thing I'll say too is you should maybe like ask your partner before prep, if you have a little bit of prep, what like the threat level red arguments are. And this is when I would say co-prepping. If you trust your partner, which you should, everyone should trust their partner. Just trust. Just be like, I just trust. You have to. It's like a trust fall, right? Especially if they're, you know what I mean. It's like they're helping you out. Just do the trust fall a few times and then ask them this question. It'll look really weird in prep because you're going to be trust falling, and the judge is like, "What is happening?" But no, sorry, this is like a dad joke. Okay, so right, ask them what these threat level red arguments are. Like, what do I really need to answer? And then you can have them prep some of them. Be like, okay, great, cool. Did you prep zero policy failure, no value to life, right? Or you could prep, or you prep, this turns the advantage or whatever. Or you could prep some of those things and have them prep other stuff too. But it's useful sometimes to ask your partner, right? Be like, okay, what's your read on the debate? If we lose, what are we going to lose on? Right. And then, prep the 2AR from there. So, all right, cool. Thank you all for coming, and yeah, have a good lunch. So.